The San Antonio Spurs have their future centerpiece already set in Victor Wembanyama. He's going to be a perennial All-NBA player for years to come, barring injury, and they find themselves with 2 top 8 picks in the 2024 NBA draft. What's the best way for them to construct a roster that's going to allow them to compete for years to come? That's what we're talking about today. Stick around. We're talking what the San Antonio Spurs need to do in the NBA draft this coming year. Hello and welcome back to Green Flag Sports. We're continuing our coverage of the 2024 NBA draft and we're focusing on the San Antonio Spurs today. As we mentioned in the open, there's so much potential, in their future. There's an opportunity for them to build a true contender. And in this draft class, they're going to have 2 picks. So they're going to have the number 4 pick and the number 8 pick, and those are what we're going to primarily focus this discussion on. There are loads of options for them to pursue. And we're going to talk about, the key aspect of these 2 picks being how do they pair with Victor Wembanyama, because that's what the Spurs should be really concerning themselves with. They have their guy, and that's not changing. So you have the opportunity to now construct a roster that suits his strengths and sets you up for success. So we're going to talk about a few players, all of which are projected to go around that mark, and we'll talk about why we like their game and show some video that highlights some of those attributes. So stick with us. We're going to start off with talking about a big man that hasn't been linked to them as much as some of these other prospects. So the first player I want to talk about is Buelis, who is currently on the G League Ignite team. He's a kind of big combo forward, kind of a 3, kind of a 4, but can just do a lot of stuff on the basketball court. And when I look at what San Antonio is trying to do and what they already have in place with guys like Wembanyama and Sochan, they have some guys who are big, versatile, and can handle the ball, can do things in traffic, can really get offense running. And that's where I like Buelis. So he is someone who can grab a defensive rebound, push the ball in transition, has excellent vision and awareness, can share the ball in the half court. That is where he excels. Now, offensively, he has some other parts to his game. I mean, he has a 3-point shot that was not very efficient last year. He has athleticism to finish around the rim. But I like the idea for the Spurs, specifically with his playmaking ability, to be able to help kind of just push that pace a little bit, get Wembanyama more involved, not have a true, guard who's going to need the ball in his hands all the time in order to make things happen. I like kind of spreading that responsibility out amongst some of the other players on the team. And I think when you can trot out a lineup of Sochan, Buelis, Wembanyama, that's just going to add some dynamicism to your offense and really make you exciting for the future. So I think that's something where I would seriously consider him at 4 if I were the Spurs. I think that would be a smart move. But we'll see how the draft shakes down. We're going to talk about a few more players that they could either pair with Buelis or take instead of him that are going to help their chances even more. Next, we're going to talk about the guard position, and specifically we're going to talk Stefan Castle. He's out of UConn. He is a bigger guard who can absolutely lock things down defensively, but also has a pretty developed pick and roll game, which will play off of Wembanyama very well. Now he's probably the most projected player to San Antonio out of the various options that are on the board for them. So, I could see this coming to fruition. I think they'll be very intrigued by his defensive versatility. Like you'll see in some of these highlights that we're going to roll, he can move his feet. He's very long. He played well with Klingon in college, which is, probably a similar length. I mean, obviously not as long as Wembanyama, but, he's used to playing with a rim protector who can kind of cover some of his mistakes as he aggressively navigates pick and roll defense. So I like the pick. I think offensively there are some concerns. I don't know that it necessarily fits where you want to go with modern basketball, but maybe he gets substantially better. That's kind of hard to say. But Stefan Castle, definitely not a bad pick for San Antonio. Now, next, I want to briefly talk about Reed Sheppard. I think it's becoming increasingly unlikely that he's going to be available at this slot. But if you can pair Wembanyama up with a shooter of Reed Sheppard's capability, then that gives you some crazy dynamic things to do on offense. It's going to create more spacing for both players. I would love the fit if I didn't think he was going to go to the Rockets. So that's just another one to throw in there. If he somehow falls to number 4, I think they're going to have some tough decisions to make as what direction they want to go. Again, I think the fit is amazing. I think he can get his defensive liabilities a little more covered with Wembanyama than he would with really any other team. So would love the pick, but I'm not necessarily sure I could actually see this one happening in a realistic universe. So let's shift our focus now to that number 8 pick and what we think they should be doing there. There's a lot of really interesting options, and I think the one that they are probably most closely tied to or most often projected to make would be Devin Carter out of Providence. Now, he's not a huge guard. He's 6'2", but he can be a defensive menace. I think he had 70-something blocks over the past 2 seasons. And is really dynamic with the ball in his hand. So you talk about a guy who can operate in a pick and roll situation, like he probably pairs up the best with Wembanyama in that sense because he's a good shooter. He can attack off of a pick and roll. He's really adept at making that pitch back pass to his big if they can shoot. He can also keep his head up and find guys as they're cutting through the middle and navigating traffic as he's doing the same, coming off of a high ball screen. There's a lot to like about his game, and I think from a two ends of the court standpoint, he can impact it defensively, and I think he's going to do a good job there. And Wembanyama, as we talked about with Reed Sheppard, is going to let him be a little bit more aggressive, which is going to help him out quite a bit. And then offensively, he's going to be able to work with Wembanyama and is probably going to defer to him more than most guards would, especially early on. Like you're going to have a real pick and pop or pick and roll lob threat that you can work either way. It's a really good match. And I think if he's there, that ultimately will be their selection at number 8. But there's a couple other intriguing possibilities there as well. Now, another individual who's being projected to be in that 7 to 10 range is Cody Williams out of Colorado. And he is a big wing, 6'7", 6'8". Really had a super efficient year at Colorado last year. Can play in a lot of different spots, isn't ball reliant, so he's not someone where you have to scheme up ways to get the ball in his hands. He can just make tough shots. He can definitely make open shots. He's a very good spot up shooter. He can cut to the rim, operate in space, and play within an offense. Or he can straight up attack the rim when needed and finish either athletically with dunks or through contact, or he can find space and kind of be creative with a diverse package of finishing moves around the rim. So there's, from a wing perspective, I think he profiles really well. Like if, it depends on what they do with that 4th pick. So if they get Buelis, like it probably wouldn't be Cody Williams at 8 because those guys are very similar. And I know I like having a lot of these kind of Swiss Army knives out there at all times, but I don't think you want to, log jam yourself all that much, especially with some of the pieces that they already have playing in San Antonio. So again, I like Cody Williams. If he's there, I think he'll be under consideration, but it's going to depend on what they're doing with that 4th pick. So that's going to really do it for our coverage of individual prospects. And I want to end this with talking around my thought process and the combinations that I think are at play from that group. If I'm the Spurs and I'm drafting and can kind of create my own path, I think I would be very comfortable taking Buelis at 4 and then Devin Carter at 8 because I think that gives you some really interesting lineup combinations that you can play with each other, can surround Wembanyama with competent shooting and playmaking, as well as some decent defense on top of all of that. So there's a lot of opportunities for them to create a team that is just going to play to Wembanyama's strength. It's going to allow him to still handle the ball some. That's definitely going to put him in situations to succeed out of a pick and roll. It's going to take some of the playmaking load off of his shoulders while giving it to guys who are still willing passers and able passers. I think that's the most important thing. I don't think a guy like Rob Dillingham, for example, who's more of a ball dominant point guard, like that's not necessarily somebody who I think you're gonna want to pair with Wembanyama. I don't think that's a very good fit. I don't think you're going to want another true big. I think that, if Klingon is around, it's certainly interesting to pair Klingon with a new age big like Wembanyama. But I just think you're putting too many eggs in that big man basket at that point. And San Antonio does have a history with the Twin Towers, but I'm not sure that these Twin Towers make a whole lot of sense. So let me know what you think. Spurs fans, sound off. What are you guys hoping for with the 4 and the 8? Do you want to even take those picks? Are we looking to trade down? It is considered a weak draft, so there's a lot of different variables at play, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the next week plays out, how this draft goes. But I think, as someone who paid a good amount of attention to the Spurs last year, it's an exciting time to be watching them, to see how they're going to grow and develop what is just a generational talent. Not necessarily going to be a generational player, but a generational talent for sure. Crafting a team is super important. I'm excited to see how it goes. Thank you so much for being here and watching. I will see you on the next one.